One of the things that we're going to talk about is the scuffing of the knife. So, like, this is a very good knife here, but you can see how worn it is. It was black. When you get a knife that's nice and black like that, and the only thing that is got any shine at all is just the extreme cutting edge, if you are sharpening that and you go off of the grinding wheel a little bit and get a scratch on it, but even something like this with that nice wear pattern on it, you still don't want to get it scratched. So let's go to the grinding wheel, and I'm going to show you how to be careful on the grinding wheel so you don't run off the side. So when you're coming to the wheel, if you're going across like this, just to kind of review this, you have two variables. You have where you place it on the wheel and also the angle of your wrist. If you're using the flat part of the wheel here, you only have one variable, and that's the angle. So no matter where you're putting it on the wheel here, that angle is going to you only have one variable. And so if we were coming straight across the wheel like this, then it's as the wheel is moving, it's easier to slip and come off and let that grinding wheel then could scratch the edge. So to increase that area, you go on the angle a little bit. And you have to do the same with the buffing wheel. So you're going to go on an angle like this and an angle like that. Then you have more room to play with without coming off that wheel. Then by locking your wrist, you're going to stay pretty close on there, but it's still possible to slip. So when you're grinding this, keep in mind, keep your concentration on not going off of that wheel. So we're just going to go and run it across and sharpen this. So I have a light above here that's coming down, and I can see that burr as it raises up, and I really like to watch that burr develop going across the whole edge. So right now I'm just taking and fatiguing that burr back and forth so it'll break easier. The purpose of this part of the demonstration is to show you that 45-degree angle, a little bit more forgiving than slipping off, but you still could slip off and you still could scuff up the rest of the blade. Let's go and start doing some polishing. First, I'm going to take a knife here. You can see this has got some scratches in it, but I'm going to put some more scratches in, and we're going to sand them out. To buff this out, what I'm going to use is just sandpaper, and I'm using emery. So I've got, if you want to write the grits down, I have a 220 grit, and the higher the number, the finer the sandpaper. Then I'll go to a 320, then I'll go to a 400, then I'll go to a 600 grit, and then a 1500 grit, and then maybe buff it a little bit with a 2000. So I'm going to take the 220 to start with. It's pretty rough, and I'm going to sand it long enough to where I don't see the scratches anymore. Now some of those scratches are pretty heavy. So what I might do is even go to a coarser sandpaper. This one here, I think, this is an 80 grit. Because those last scratches I can still see going across. So now I'm going to go back to the 220 grit. I can still see some of those, but I don't want to take too much time. They're almost out. You can kind of see it's cleaning up a little bit, but you can still see a little bit my last run in there. A little bit more sanding and it'd be out, but it probably would take another 5-10 minutes. Now I'm on the 320. So all the next steps that I'm going up, we're just reducing the size of the scratches. I'm going to go to the 400 now. Now I'm going to go to the 600. Now the 1500. Now you could do the same like with plastic, like your lenses on your, the headlights on your car, tail light if it gets scratched, the plastic. You can do the same thing, buffing the scratches out. All right, I don't quite have a mirror finish on there, but the 1500 will, if you work at it long enough, you'll be able to see your reflection in it. But it's starting to look pretty good. The thing that you got to be careful of, here the logo was put in there pretty deep. Some of it is just etched on the top, and you got to be careful that you don't sand that markings off, especially if it's a collector's knife. We're going to talk a little bit now about the coatings that you can put on a knife. Here, I got to demagnetize this. We're going to talk a little bit about magnetism, but all my shavings were sticking to it. The coatings that I've got here, if I was to coat this knife to be food safe, if I needed some kind of a coating on it, I would use a mineral oil. Mineral oil is food safe. You can drink it as far as if you need a laxative. So mineral oil is a good choice for any kind of a food product. Even if you're using your knife, pocket knife, for peeling, apples and that sort of thing, I would recommend not using a polyurethane spray. But I got a gloss spray that I use, and I also have a matte finish. Now, both of these are oil-based. They're polyurethanes. They're both made. This one is Rust-Oleum, and this one is Minwax. Now, the matte finish, what I use that for, it protects the tool, but I use it on my carving tool. So I want to show you what I did here with the carving tool is I buffed it off. I put a tape over the end here. I put the matte finish on, and I'm trying to turn it so you can see the reflection right on the end. So you can see where it's shiny right on the end, and the rest is a matte finish. I put tape over that to show you the difference. And the reason why I like a matte finish on my tools, it not only protects it, but normally I'm working in a fairly strong light, and the light reflecting off is coming into my eyes all the time. So by putting a matte finish on, you're not getting the light reflecting in your eyes. Just once in a while, I'll just take and just spray the matte finish on my carving tools. This is the knife here. I sprayed the gloss, and that's why this tape is. I put the tape on so you could see the difference. And the difference, I'm going to try to tip it so you can see where I just took it off here. It's kind of hard to get the light to reflect there, but you can see that it's shinier here where I just took the tape off than back here. So you're taking some of the shine off, even if you put that high gloss on it. You can see that little difference from there to there. That's why I put the tape on. This is not a good knife. It's experimental thing. For kitchen knives, when people bring it to me, I use this goop. This is the orange goop. It's a waterless hand cleaner, and they advertise that it'll make your hands so they're dinner table ready. So it's food safe. People come in and they have stains on their knife, the kitchen knives and that. By just taking and rubbing the goop on there, it cleans them up real nice, takes the stains off and that sort of thing. I wouldn't use any of the polyurethane sprays on anything that's going to go into the kitchen, be used for food, because even though it's food safe, it's still a plastic, and you don't want pieces of plastic, little flakes, ever coming off on your food. It just doesn't seem right, even though it might not hurt you. I want to go now and talk about the planer and how to do these planer blades. So you could probably do them yourself in the shop. I do a lot of these, sharpening these. They keep coming back. A pattern shop brings most of their stuff here from me, and I get all their planer blades. So what you're looking at here is a bench sander. So it's just a belt sander that goes on the bench, and it has a table on it in front of it. And it just, the belt is coming down. This is my fixture here in the front. So let me kind of show you how this fixturing works. I've got a board here, and this board, I want to put it up by the camera so you can kind of see that it has got a groove all the way along, and that's what I run the planer blades in, and that's my gauge. And then I've got a little cavity that I carved in here, just a little pocket, and we're going to use the pocket first here. So I'm going to set up tool that's, you would consider this tool here, it's a short bent gouge that would be a little difficult to try to get the angle on it. So something like this, you can take this here fixture, and what you do, I am holding it, I'm moving this around, the handle is in that pocket, and I'm setting it against, so it's perpendicular here, this way to the piece of wood, and I'm looking here at this bevel, and I'm getting the bevel to it just touching right there, and once I get that, then I'm just going to take and clamp it. So once I clamp it, now I can take and I can spin this as the belt is running, and I keep that same angle as I'm rotating it right in that cup. That I'm not going to, this tool is sharp, I don't want to grind it, but that's what holds that angle. So that angle, whether you're turning it this way, it'll hold that same angle. You can do the V tool the same. That's a nice simple fixture that you can do. Here I've got for one of my planes, this plane here, I have the blade, and the way I set that up, now I'm not going to take the chip breaker off, it doesn't need to come off, but what I do is I set that up the same way as I did the carving chisel. I'm using the slot here, setting it up to where I'm looking at that bevel here on the side and making sure it's right up against it all the way, and that there's no gap in the top. Then I'm going to clamp it. I'm feeling a little bit of a burr on it. To check it, you take a machinist square, and you're going to go down the side of it, and you're going to check right across that top to make sure that it is square. So you're taking the side of the cutter here, not the chip breaker, right on the blade, and that's what you're checking to make sure that that's square. So I hold it up to the light, make sure I don't see any light in there. Doing the planer blades, I do the same way. You need that slot, so I'm again moving it up to where I'm eyeballing it, and I'm going to move it down to the end so I can see that bevel as it's going against the sanding belt. And I'm adjusting it Okay, I'm making sure it's tight and that it's tight up against it. Now I just sharpened these blades. The table moved. So let me get back to the, I like to square this table up and it just slid down on me. Didn't have the nut tight enough, I guess. All right, so now I'm eyeballing that bevel, making sure I'm tight going across, and I put on the clamps. And now what I do is I come across, and this one here, they hit a nail or something. There was a big nick in it, so I had to take a lot of material off. And as I'm doing that, I just take a straight edge. Now, the way it goes into the planer, it doesn't have to have an accurate dimension from here to here. So if there's a little bit of a taper, that's okay, because you have all these adjustments in the planer that you can make the adjustment. So the critical thing is this here ruler is straight, and I put it across there and I make sure there's no gaps. Now I do see slight gaps, because you can see a gap, a light coming through, even if it's a couple thousandths of an inch. And I don't worry about 2 or 3 thousandths. But if it gets more than 5 thousandths, I use a feeler gauge to go in there, and I kind of know what 5 thousandths looks like. So I try to keep it flat within about 5 thousandths. And it's pretty easy to do, because when you're coming across this, you know, if you get a little bit of a high side here, let's say I have a high spot here, I just kind of put a little bit more pressure right on that spot until I get everything flat. And normally it stays pretty flat. I don't really have to fight it. Now the secret to this, where the pattern maker says that when I sharpen them, they last quite a bit longer than when he was sending them out and getting them ground. When they'd send it to the machine shop would just grind it and they wouldn't buff it. But what I'm doing is I put it on the buffer, you know, with the buffing compound, and I'm getting that razor edge so you can shave with these here blades. And that is, I think, makes the difference. So I get all his business in sharpening. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about magnetism. Now this is a demagnetizer that you can pick up on eBay, and I can't remember how much I paid for it, but it probably was in that maybe $30 area. It will magnetize and demagnetize. You don't want to have your tools magnetized. I've got a pile here of shavings, metal shavings, that you could probably see. That's right here where my finger is. Right now, this is not magnetized. If I magnetize it, let me magnetize it here. Okay, now it's magnetized. And look at, it's picking up, look at all the metal shavings it has. And you see the pattern of those metal shavings. The magnetism, the flux lines right at the sharp edges, that's where the flux lines are the densest. So that's where your magnetism is the strongest. So if you can imagine that if your tools become magnetized, and how they become magnetized is they touch another magnet. You might have a magnetic strip in your shop you put your tools against, and any hardened material it'll be magnetized. It'll become a magnet if it becomes in contact with another magnet. So it takes this thing here to demagnetize it. They have those little passive demagnetizers that you put it through one hole and go back and forth on it, and that will magnetize it. And you move it over to the next hole. It doesn't take all the magnetism out, but this does. So what I did to magnetize this was I left it on, and then when I shut the machine off, took the, when it finished, see, it's reversing the polarity. It's lining up the dipoles, and what it does when you stop it, then it takes the dipoles and leaves aligned in one direction or the other because of the alternation. So if it is running and I stop it and pick it up, now it's a magnet. If I pick it up while it's running, then it's like a degausser that it's now not magnetized. So I can go over to the metal shavings and it doesn't pick any up. So so how your tools are going to dull real fast if your tools are magnetized is all these metal shavings are the hard steel that you just took off of here. And the magnetic flux lines are the densest right at the sharp edges, and that's your cutting edge. And if you wipe it off, the magnetism, the little pieces, the particles, they might be only microscopic, but they're going to come and they're going to cling to that edge. And when you might not even be able to see it there, but when you go to cut it, a piece of wood, that little loose piece of steel is going to jam itself right into that microscopic edge, and it'll make a nick in there for you. So it starts dulling the tool down immediately. And how to test? Now we saw I could magnetize this because it's hard steel. So you can test steel for hardness. Let's say this here knife here. Let me just clean off this fuzz off the top here. Okay. I'll take and magnetize this knife. See if it's a hardened steel. There. It's a hardened steel. So that holds the magnetism very well. Let me demagnetize it. Now I lift it up while it was running, and it doesn't pick up any. This is a piece of steel that is not hard, maybe just a little bit hard. And so if now it should be magnetized, it picks up just very little. So you see there's almost no hardness, and it'll give it up pretty quick. It doesn't hold it very strong. So there's almost no hardness to this piece